Hey folks, it's Stefan, back again with another episode of The Gamer's Companion to Music. Boy, do we have a treat for you today. This episode is gonna be massive. You hear that Dovahkiin chant behind me? Well, that can only mean one thing. Today, we're gonna tackle the beast that is Skyrim. Everything about this game is massive. The world, the quests, the endless possibilities, and yes, the music is as well. Boasting a soundtrack in excess of 3 hours, you better strap in for a long one today. Let's see what this atmospheric score has in store for us. Skyrim was made by Bethesda Game Studios and was released on PS3, 360, and PC in November of 2011. Feels a lot longer ago than that, doesn't it? It was the 2011 Game of the Year by many standards. No, seriously, check out this list of publications that gave it Game of the Year. Crazy, right? Not only are the character possibilities seemingly endless, but your styles of play can be so varied as well. Want to be a mage? Go for it. You like to get down and dirty? Well, two-handed might just be for you. How about some sick archery, bro? It's all there for you to find in the vast, vast world that is Skyrim. The music was composed by Jeremy Soule, who worked on the third and fourth installments in the series as well, Morrowind and Oblivion. As I said before, the official soundtrack is over 3 hours long, and that doesn't include a lot of the smaller tracks in the game. The music is orchestrated for full orchestra and chorus throughout most of the game. You'd be hard-pressed to find an exploration track that doesn't feature the chorus in at least a background role. So we've established there is a lot of music, but what about it makes it great? Well, first off, just think about the magnitude of the game. If you've played it, you understand that to capture the essence of a world like this, the music has to feel really full and large, but then also has to fit the situation the players find themselves in. This is a general problem for what you might call an open-world survival exploration game. A game like Fallout and even Minecraft also has this problem. In Minecraft, the music takes a backseat big time. In Fallout, they compensate with the radio system on your Pip-Boy. Can't really put a Pip-Boy on a Nord from the era of dragons, right? That would not make too much sense. I think most people would agree that the music in Skyrim sounds very atmospheric. It's not really all that forward-moving, yet somehow still conveys that essence of grandeur the game needs. This all starts with the title music. I have a lot to say about this particular track. The opening theme is called Dragonborn and features a quote-unquote barbarian chorus that the game designers envisioned. It's the third iteration of the Elder Scrolls theme, appearing as Call of Magic in Morrowind, Reign of the Septums in Oblivion, and now Dragonborn in Skyrim. Dragonborn is the first version to include lyrics. It bears the closest resemblance to the Morrowind theme, mostly because in the Oblivion version the melody is a little more hidden underneath the soaring strings at times. Here's your comparison. Let's start with Morrowind and really listen to the melody here. Alright, now here it is in Oblivion. And finally, with a beastly men's chorus in Skyrim. The chorus only consists of 30 men, but they record it each 3 times and layer the voices over top of one another to create a 90-person chorus. The lyrics were also written in the Dragon language created for the game. The full lyrics in Dragon as well as English can be found inside the game's book, Songs of Skyrim. Besides the incredibly thick pulsing 3/4 rhythm in the piece, there are 2 other cool elements that I want to point out. First is the barbaric horn call that's heard twice. First is in the French horns, and the second time the men's chorus joins in. There would be hunting horns calling soldiers to battle at this point in time, so I thought that was a nice touch to include in the main theme. The first time, And now the second. The other's how the thing ends. It's epic as hell. After the chorus hits its last triumphant notes, the female voices emerge with an ascending line that is picked up by the strings and climbs even higher to a pivot note, which seems to be the height of the phrase. That is, until the strings slowly descend into the real climax of a phrase. A resolving chord that is held and extended for a whole 34 seconds. I'm putting on the screen a little diagram that shows what the music is doing right there, so hopefully you can follow along. This sign here is called a crescendo and indicates where the music gets louder or more intense, and this one going the opposite way is called a decrescendo, indicating where the music gets softer. Have a listen to the ending here. Another reason you might say the music in Skyrim is atmospheric is because about 95% of the game's music isn't scripted to any particular event or level as most other games are. Since there can only be so much music that the developers can physically put on the game disc, it has to be varied enough to cover a range of scenarios while still being, in essence, background ambiance. That is to say, it shouldn't be the focus in our minds, it should always support the player's game experience. Because of this, the music becomes part of the game's world in the same way that the elements like the insanely huge High Hrothgar mountain or the semi-rare occurrence of the Northern Lights do. So how does the game know what music to play and where? The music playing is based primarily on where you physically are, what you're doing, and the time of day. Here are your general categories that we'll go into. First, you have your exploration music, making up over half of the game's soundtrack. Next, music for in a dungeon, music for combat, music for when you're in a town, and slightly more specific music for when you're in one of the game's many taverns. There are also some miscellaneous tracks that don't fall into these 5 categories, but most of the major music pieces conform to this. So let's get into the specifics, shall we? Let's start with a massive bulk of the music, the exploration music. This applies to any Skyrim environment outside of a town or dungeon and you aren't in combat. This makes up most of your game's travel. The Explorer music is further divided 4 ways based on the time of day. 2 songs played during dawn, 9 during the day, 3 at dusk, and 6 overnight. Here are some general statements about the exploration music. Generally, the chords in the music don't change all that frequently. The rate at which the chords change is called harmonic motion. So if the chords aren't changing a lot, there's not a lot of harmonic motion going on. The musical segments pretty much just morph into one another. Most of the time, there aren't really any distinct cuts or triumphant finishes to a piece. The instrument choices also play a large role in the feel of the music. The score uses strings, horns, oboes, flutes, harp, piano, and very minimal percussion as well as chorus. You won't find instruments that really pierce through the texture of the music all that much. The strings and chorus are usually used to give a really rich, thick texture throughout most of the score, while the others are used for melodic content and color. You'll hear the strings and chorus throughout though. Most songs will also build to a climax at some point, and these moments are what you generally associate with making your gameplay feel more important than it actually is. You might come up to a mountain and the climax of a piece is happening and it feels like the music was written exactly for that moment. Now why this works is that you'll only ever hear these songs while you're outside exploring. If you heard this while doing a dungeon or while in a town, it might just feel completely out of place. That's why it was absolutely critical that the game has a deep and long soundtrack. Alright, the music I'm going to begin with is the music playing at dawn. The music here you'll find has higher ranges and is generally more heavenly. The first track I want to feature is called, well, Dawn. Here we feel a quarter note pulse over what we call a pedal point. A pedal point is a fixed tone that doesn't change and usually is in the bass voice, while there are other lines moving over top of it. You can hear this pedal point start in the ethereal choral or synthesized tone, which I'll hum now. Hear it? It might be easier to hear once it moves into the bass here. You hear those really lush melodies that only use quarter notes? It's not very rapid, is it? The piece builds to a climax which hears the first iteration of the French horns and then escapes into a very pretty flowing line in the medium strings and chorus. I'll be talking a lot about that high choral angelic sound through a lot of the exploration tracks. I'll also play a quick snippet of the only other dawn music called Distant Horizons. You can hear that even though the texture is thick, the music isn't really doing much but playing chord clusters to create a more rich texture. Now on to the daytime music. There are 9 songs here, and these seem to be based more around melody and rhythm. But if you listen to all 9, you will hear a very nice variety of textures, melodies, and rhythms. I really wish I could go over all of them, but I'll highlight 3 and give you some important notes on the other ones. The first song here, Under an Ancient Sun, probably is more fitting with the music from Dawn. There's absolutely no melodic content whatsoever. It starts out with high string harmonics to produce a very thin sound. Harmonics are a really cool technique on string instruments where the player doesn't press down on the string fully with their left hand, but just lightly touches the string at a spot to produce a thin sound at least an octave higher. Take a listen to the really high-pitched strings here and see if you can't tell the difference. This is your quintessential atmospheric song. No melody, pure texture. And in this way, it probably could fit every single moment you might encounter in the game. The second daytime song I'm highlighting is called Unbroken Road, and this is a great example of a very rhythmic exploration song. Listen to the pulsing strings and percussion throughout. The melodies even contrast the rhythm in that the melodic content is very drawn out, using a lot of long notes. This is a stark contrast to any of the music we've heard so far, not counting the title theme. Oh, and speaking of that title theme, check out the direct quote from the Oblivion piece, Reign of the Septums. Here's Reign again. And then now here's the awesome soaring strings and Unbroken Road. Oh, you want another one, do you? Check out this one underneath the texture in the second slower section. These small quotations give the entire series some musical glue, if you will, that starts to relate the games together. If you were an Oblivion player and then you come and hear that small quote, you think to yourself, wow, yeah, I'm absolutely in the same universe. The repeated section adds chorus in a Latin-based chant-type section here. The third song from Daytime I'm going to look at is probably the most popular song outside of the Dragonborn theme. It's called Far Horizons. You probably already recognize it from the French horn melody soaring out of the string texture. This is probably the closest to its own standalone orchestra piece in the entire game. The melodies are clear and memorable, while the harmonies move in a way that keeps the piece flowing consistently throughout. The horn starts with a melody, and then the strings pick up the continuation before the repeat comes in with a full, soaring orchestra. I'm going to have the music on the screen here, and I want to point out the really beautiful counter melody that exists in the cellos when that full orchestra comes in. See if you can't pick it out. There's also another quote from the title theme that loosely resembles that Reign of the Septims quote in the last piece that happens in the second section here. Also, notice that flowing harp that keeps it moving. The other awesome thing that happens with Far Horizons is that you can time the full orchestra section out with really any moment in the game and make it sound absolutely epic. Here's just a little montage of me playing a few scenes in the game while I overlay that part on top of it. It's really a lot of fun to do, and you should absolutely try it, not only with this song, but with any other song with an awesome climax. Those give you the three elements I wanted to bring out in the daytime music. Under an Ancient Sun was all about harmony, Unbroken Road about rhythm, and Far Horizons about melody. Here are other moments in the daytime music I'd like to just play for you and mention because I think they're quite lovely. First, the melody in From Past to Present is beautiful and plays a ton in the game. Next is the ending from Frostfall. The Jural Mountains is actually a remake from Rise to Reality from Morrowind and Through the Valides from Oblivion. It's really cool how he kept this song in all three games that he worked on. Wind Guide You is a remake of Minstrel's Lament from Oblivion as well. This piece is also about 9 minutes long and is quite textural, as was Under an Ancient Sun. Alright, now the sun is setting and dusk falls upon Skyrim. Only 3 songs could play here, and as the dawn music is, the music here is based mostly on creating the atmosphere with harmony, and is devoid of any pulsating rhythmic material. You'll hear the music in lower ranges than in any of the previous music, and the chorus uses lower ranges and voices as well. Just for the sake of it, here's another Reign of the Septims quote from The Gathering Storm. The piece I want to highlight as the music from Dusk is called Tundra. The piece sounds like it tries to start a melodic idea with a rising 2-note motif. However, it never develops into anything. The reason though I wanted to highlight this one is because of the use of a really exotic instrument from Armenia called a duduk. I actually own one and can't really make a damn sound out of it. The duduk is a double reed instrument that was most notably used in the score from Gladiator heard here. And now listen to the duduk as it's heard in Skyrim. It really is an awesome sound, and I'm surprised it's not used more in the game. Moving into the music for exploring nighttime, we have 6 tracks available, which is less than daytime but more substantial than dawn or dusk. Honestly, if you're a player like me, you end up fast traveling to daytime so that you can see what you're exploring. It's bitching out, I know, but hey, I'm not trying to die to that bear I didn't see. This music once again is very atmospheric, relying on its slow harmonic motion to convey the sense of darkness that engulfs the nighttime. Most of the music is devoid of any extended melody and primarily relies on short melodic motives. There are 2 pieces here we're going to look at. The first is called Secunda, which now in retrospect I should have done second, right? Anyway, Secunda is different from the other nighttime pieces in that it actually has a recognizable melody. The huge difference from most of the rest of the score is that it uses harp and piano, cutting the strings almost completely out of the piece. It then slowly fades away into a really pretty flute melody, probably played on the bass flute due to the insanely low register. Listen here. The next is called Standing Stones, and boy is it ominous. Right from the very beginning, you only hear low strings with the men's chorus in low ranges just kind of rumbling throughout. It's a really dark effect that they achieve. The music then morphs into a more angelic yet minor-based foreboding female chorus section. Ever feel completely at ease listening to the piece, but you don't really get that sense that there's something sneaking up behind you the whole time. It's an odd type of feeling since it combines so many of the elements we've already talked about through it. You got low rumbling chorus, some high female chorus, you got lack of a melody and then a hint of a melody, slow harmonic motion, faster harmonic motion. It really could fit into any of the times of day if it wanted to. That makes up all of the exploration music we're going to cover today. Aren't you feeling lucky that there's still the combat music, the dungeon music, town and tavern music left to cover? I told you to strap in, so let's continue, shall we? Now we get to take everything I just said about the orchestration and the feel of the music and throw it completely out the window as we talk about the music you'll hear in combat. There seems to be 2 categories here. You've got music for general combat and the music for dragon-specific combat. The dragon combat music is way more epic in my opinion, but we'll get into all that in a minute. All of the general combat music has a very rhythmic and heavy feel to it. It makes sense, right? But what gives it that feel though? Is it the driving rhythms throughout? Is it the scoring? Well, if you ask me, I'd say the inclusion of heavy percussion is what really does it. It isn't prevalent in all of the combat tracks, but the timpani and toms make their presence felt enough throughout this music to make it stand out greatly from the other music in the game. The way the combat music is written, it kind of gives the player a warning system that they've entered into combat, especially when they don't know they have. It's very possible in Skyrim as you're out exploring for enemies to kind of sneak up on you or walk right by them without knowing they're there. It's not just that the music changes though, it's how the music changes. Each of the combat tracks has some sort of percussive hit at the very beginning that sort of jars you out of your peaceful exploration musically to distinctly signify a change in events. There are 6 general combat tracks, so I'm going to play you the beginnings of each of them so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. If you've played the game for any length of time, they should all sound very, very familiar since they play so often throughout the game. The tracks are also much shorter, maybe about 1.5 to 2 minutes long. You know, if you're in combat for that long, you're most likely dead anyway, or if you play the game like me, you're hiding like a little bitch behind your 2 conjured Dremora lords. I should also note that the combat music doesn't always play for smaller enemies. I guess the game just doesn't count rabbit fights as important enough to change the music for it. Since you end up fighting so many damn dragons in the game, I guess it makes sense for there to be 2 designated tracks for the dragon fights. These are slightly longer than the others, maybe in about the 3-minute range. The way these seem way more epic though is the use of the chorus. In the general combat music, the chorus is barely noticeable, and when it is, they're just singing supplemental long tones. In both of the dragon combat tracks, however, the chorus is adding to the rhythmic intensity with chant-like melodies. The first, Watch the Skies, is in a non-standard time signature, often called complex time. Instead of having your steady pulse like a 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, or a 1 and 2 and 3 and etc., the first 2 beats are standard, but the third adds an extra 8th note. This is an example of 7/8 time, where you get this 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and feel. You can really hear the sort of hitch in the beat as you want it to pulse normally, but then it doesn't on the third beat. This creates a slightly unsettled feeling that's absolutely great for fights. The second track is called One They Fear, and it's essentially the Dragonborn theme, just slightly reorchestrated to differentiate it slightly from the original melody. It makes sense that your epic theme would be playing during an epic fight, slaying epic dragons with your epic swords or epic arrows. It's epic! As before, the songs end up being a built-in warning system, since it definitely happens all the time where you're just, in a forest or exploring the plains, and then you hear the Dragonborn theme and go into a state of sheer panic. Oftentimes, the thoughts in my head go something like this. Ah, what a nice day. You can hear the birds chirping. Oh shit, dragon, fuck, where is it? Dragon red, I can't see it. Dremora lords, where you at? Bring that fucker down. Yeah, we've all been there. Moving from very rhythmically intense combat music, we go to the completely atmospheric and almost stagnant dungeon music. One thing I learned on this most recent playthrough that I did is that you're in dungeons and caverns a lot in this game. It might help that there are so damn many of them, or that most quests take you through them. Now, when I say absence of melody, I mean it here. The 9 dungeon tracks might be less of music in the traditional sense than they are general atmospheric soundscapes. They're based all around texture and ambiance. You get these half-note harmonic motives that recur through these pieces, often in very muted and processed instrumentations. You might be hearing choral lines, but they've been fed through so many sound processors or limiters and all things of that nature that they're barely distinguishable as instruments. This is what greatly enhances the effect of the music here. The dungeon tracks are named in-game as Dungeon, Dungeon Cave, Dungeon Fort, and Dungeon Ice. Now, you'll technically hear different music based on the type of dungeon you're in, but honestly, there aren't really enough distinguishing features, or any at all for that matter, that might set the music apart like the music for, say, Explore the Day and Explore the Night do. The only distinction is that in the fort, music you get is more sort of a pulsing percussive rhythm, as opposed to the rest that's more arrhythmic and amorphous. Just listen to this one called Shadows and Echoes for a really good sense of the super atmospheric soundscape. Listen to how different the sounds are from the rest of the score that you've been hearing for the past while. The town music is pretty similar to the exploration music, to be quite honest. You end up hearing the same things over and over, which is not a bad thing, I'm just saying. It's so similar, in fact, to the Explorer music that it actually reuses one of the daytime exploration pieces from past to present. That's right, you might hear that song in a town or just out on the town. Oh, sorry, I couldn't help myself there. You can hear how the music tends to be similar in what is probably my favorite town song called The Streets of Whiterun. It's so peaceful and the use of piano is just glorious. The tavern music is very specific. It's the first time today that you'll hear acoustic guitars and lutes and other plucked and fretted string instruments like that, as well as the lovely pan flute/recorder. What's it trying to emulate? Well, you can probably figure that out. It's emulating the folk songs and traveling minstrels who would set up shop in a tavern and provide music. The music here is very soothing. The other cool part is that when you're listening to the wonderful tavern music, you can ask the musician to play and sing a song for you in the game. These were written into the lore, and you can find the lyrics oftentimes in random books you encounter throughout the game. You're listening to Around the Fire right now, but have a listen to The Bannered Mare for a good example of the acoustic strummed and plucked guitars. There are some other specialty tracks that were written for more scripted events in the game. The Imperial Castle has its own music, for example, and so does the Stormcloak Castle, which also shares its music with Dragonreach, the castle at Whiterun. I've also got to mention the Sovngarde chant here. The game lore is that the heroes of valor who exist in Sovngarde would be the ones singing this theme. The lyrics are exactly the same as the Dragonborn theme, but the music and melody are way different. I think it's possible that the game is trying to imply that this is the true Dragonborn melody, and it's been lost throughout the ages and transformed into what we hear today. If it's actually the case, it's an awesome touch, since it makes sense that this would have been in essence a folk song passed down through the ages. Listen to the Sovngarde chant. And now the Dragonborn one. It's pretty cool, right? The other specialty song I want to play is the music for when you discover High Hrothgar for the first time, called 7,000 Steps. It's just awesome, and, well, hell, I just want to play it. The absolute last piece of music in the game that I'm going to talk about is called Skyrim Atmospheres. This is the glue that holds absolutely everything together. Now on the soundtrack it's just listed as one long track, but it consists of most of the palette tracks listed in the game's music. Sometimes you hear these as standalone atmospheric tracks that break up the more melodic exploration music, and sometimes these things are layered into the music, mostly prevalent in dungeons. You'll hear things like crickets and birds and rain in the background of most of them, and this actually creates the sense that you're out in the wildlife. You might get out in the wild and hear one of the Explore Day tracks, and then one of the Atmospheres, and then another Explore Day track, then maybe another Atmosphere or two, and then another Explore will play. I'm not entirely sure how the game decides the order, but it's a nice way to break up the exploration music so that, it doesn't become stale in your mind. I'm not saying I'd be upset if Far Horizons played on an infinite loop, but it's a very clever way to keep the game fresh at all times. You wouldn't really be able to recognize the atmospheric music in particular and go, oh, that's this one specifically. So it's really an awesome way to integrate the environment into the game's music. Now the last thing I'm going to talk about today are the few times where your fast traveling screws up the game's ability to correctly fade in and out of the music tracks. I wasn't even going to talk about this, but it happened way too many times during my most recent playthrough to ignore. So the ability to fast travel in a game is pretty crucial in a world as vast as this. The game passes time though while you fast travel, so oftentimes you'll start to travel during the day, but when you get there it'll be nighttime or something like that. Or maybe you'll travel from a city to somewhere out in the open. I said before that the music usually just kind of fades out when it's done, and most of the time that's built into the score. Now there's always a loading screen when you fast travel, so this is where I think the game kind of makes its snap decision about the current state of the music compared to the state it needs to be in next. A lot of times you'll get these really sharp cuts from the middle of the current piece to whatever the game decides it needs next, music or atmospheres. Or maybe you'll get to a place and the music starts playing but there's a dragon there immediately. Sometimes the game will play the totally wrong music because you screwed it all up. You just had to fast travel, didn't you? Now I'll find some examples from the footage and play them as is from the game capture to illustrate the point right here. We did it! We finally got to the end! With games becoming more vast and expansive these days, so must the music. And the Skyrim music is a great example of the direction we're heading with exploratory games these days. The lush music provides not only a great backdrop for the game, but a great atmosphere that the world lives and breathes in. It makes you feel like the music is alive. I hope you've enjoyed this super long edition of the Gamer's Companion to Music, and until next time, thank you so much for watching, and so long. Missed an episode of the Gamer's Companion to Music? Check out this playlist right here and make sure to follow us on Twitter at SVolpGaming.